Hello and welcome to Sit Down with the Chief. We're here with editor Richard Steyer, who's going to talk about a jury's rejection of a contention that cops trumped up an arrest in order to make overtime, a case that if they had been found guilty could have had major implications for the NYPD. Richard?
Well, you could tell that this wasn't just an ordinary civil suit brought against individual officers by the fact that the Corporation Counsel had more than a dozen people in court during the trial, that this was a great concern to the city, both from a public relations standpoint and from a potential second trial that would have been held by the judge who was hearing the case, Jack Weinstein. It grew out of a claim that a man named Hector Cordero, back in October of 2014, had been arrested for selling 2 bags of crack to somebody in the proximity of a bodega that was within the 83rd precinct. Basically, this was a street narcotics enforcement unit operation. They had one person, Hugo Ugasian, as the police officer who was basically supposed to be the observation officer and who was said to have witnessed the transaction. You had a couple of other cops who then moved in and got Mr. Cordero, who was a clerk inside the bodega, to come outside and submit to arrest. There were a number of things that his lawyer, Gabriel Harvis, brought out in the course of the trial that suggested that the cops hadn't exactly followed the rule book in terms of how they conducted the search, in terms of the way the arrest was carried out, and in terms of policy that had been enunciated by the police commissioner at the time, Bill Bratton, that whenever you're catching somebody for what seems like a relatively small offense, one of the things you ought to do is see whether you can flip that person and get them to implicate somebody who's higher up in the food chain. This was a situation in which the owner of the bodega had said that Cordero never left the bodega, although he was said to have completed the transaction outside it. The person who got the drugs was caught by cops a few yards away, and there were 2 bags of crack in his possession, very small quantity, without a doubt. But in any event, Ugasian, during his testimony, admitted that he had been disciplined several times for false arrests and for falsifying overtime, and that he had been the subject of false arrest suits. There were also questions raised by the attorney for Mr. Cordero as to why the cops had not searched inside the bodega. They didn't find any drugs on Cordero, although they found $584 in his pocket. You would have figured if he was dealing in any kind of quantity that wouldn't have been the last of his stash, but they didn't check there. They didn't find any drugs on him when they searched him in the precinct. All they found was the money, and the sergeant who had been the ranking officer there had not logged in the arrest being made or an earlier arrest that was said by one of the other officers to be the reason that he had wound up earning 8 hours of overtime later on that evening. Ultimately, the jurors decided that the lawyer had not proven the case on behalf of his client. It still left police in a somewhat embarrassing position because of the fact that so much had not been done according to Hoyle, and because you had at least one cop involved who in the past had gotten into trouble with his superiors because they believed that the overtime he was putting in for wasn't necessarily earned. But ultimately, because of the jury not finding the cops liable, there won't be any further action. Weinstein will not be convening a trial that would look not only at something like this, but also at the practice of testifying that cops have been known to engage in terms of tailoring their testimony to get convictions, even if the persons involved were not guilty of the crime that they were accused of. So, for the moment anyway, the NYPD dodged the moment.
Thank you, Richard Steyer, and thank you for watching Sit Down with the Chief.